If you were invisible to everyone around you, would you still choose to be kind? Not the easy kind, not the kindness you offer when someone is watching, when there's something to gain, when the room is full and your reputation is quietly on the line. The harder kind. The kindness you give at 5:30 in the morning, when no one is looking, when you are running on 2 hours of sleep and the world has made very clear it does not intend to return the favor. That's the question this story answers, and the man at the center of it never had to think twice. His name was Coulter Whitaker, 34 years old, dark hair shot through with early gray. Not the distinguished kind that comes with corner offices, the kind that comes from worry, from warehouse shifts, from raising a child alone. His hands were rough from work. Most people never notice until it stops getting done. He pushed a janitor's cart through the marble lobby of a Chicago corporate tower at 5:30 in the morning. Before the coffee was brewed, before the elevators filled, before a single executive had walked through the door. He had been awake since 3 a.m. He had a 6-year-old daughter at home named Juniper, asleep under a quilt with a stuffed elephant named Mr. Ellie tucked under her chin. He had a second job at a warehouse on the south side, a heart specialist appointment to keep, a prescription to refill, and exactly $14 in his checking account until Friday. And he had, tucked quietly in his chest like a pilot light that never went out, an absolute and unshakable commitment to kindness. He had learned it from his late wife, Sarah. She used to say it like a prayer, low and steady, on the hardest days. Kindness is the only thing we can give away and still keep. She had believed it all the way to the end, even in that hospital room, even when the world had gone very small and very quiet. She had held his hand and said it one last time, like she was leaving him something to carry. He said it to Juniper every night before bed. He said it to himself on the mornings when it was difficult to mean it. He meant it anyway. That particular Tuesday morning, at precisely 7:15, CEO Marin Harrington walked into the lobby of Harrington Industries headquarters. Her heels announced her before she arrived, sharp, deliberate clicks against the marble, the kind of sound that makes nearby conversations pause without anyone meaning them to. Her blonde hair was pinned back in a perfect knot. Her suit cost more than Coulter's monthly rent. She was already 2 phone calls deep into her morning and irritated about something she hadn't finished being irritated about from the night before. She stopped only when she saw his cleaning cart, partially blocking the path to the executive elevator. 20 employees were watching from the lobby. No one said anything. Her voice, when it came, was not raised. It didn't need to be. If this is the standard we're hiring now, no wonder everything keeps falling apart. Coulter lowered his head, moved the cart, said, without bitterness, without sarcasm, with nothing at all except quiet dignity, "I apologize, ma'am. It won't happen again." She glanced at his calloused hands, at the gray in his hair, at the name patch stitched slightly crooked on his uniform, the kind of crooked that says, "I ironed this myself at midnight after a warehouse shift." And she walked away without another word. He finished his route in silence. He mopped the very floor her heels had crossed, and under his breath, he repeated what Sarah had left him. Kindness is the only thing we can give away and still keep. He thought about Juniper, about Friday's prescription, about the promise he had made in that hospital room 3 years ago, when the world had narrowed down to 2 hands and 1 voice, and the particular courage it takes to keep going after the person who taught you how is gone. What Marin Harrington did not know, standing there in her perfect suit on her gleaming floor, already moving on to the next problem on her list, was that exactly 7 days later, this invisible man in the Navy uniform would be lying on a narrow hospital bed, pale and spent, giving the rarest thing he had left for her daughter. Without being asked, without hesitation, without keeping score. Stay with this story, because what happens next, in a hospital hallway with a frightened little girl and a worn stuffed elephant, is the moment everything changed. If you had been treated the way Coulter was that morning, would you still have shown up to help? Drop a yes or no below. I genuinely want to know. 7 days after that lobby morning, Coulter was holding Juniper's hand on the sidewalk outside St. Vincent's Hospital, 2 blocks from Harrington Industries, close enough that he could still see the top floors of that glass tower from the crosswalk. He didn't look up. Routine heart murmur checkup, 3rd one this year. Dr. Osai ran about 15 minutes behind. Coulter had long since built that into his schedule. The way he built in everything, quietly, precisely, with no margin for error and no one else to call if things went sideways. No grandmother down the street, no sister with a minivan. Just him. Juniper was wearing her yellow raincoat. It wasn't raining. She had declared it a yellow raincoat day with the kind of certainty that leaves no room for debate. And Coulter had learned years ago that some decisions belong entirely to 6-year-olds. Mr. Ellie was tucked under her free arm, one floppy ear worn smooth from years of faithful service. She was skipping on every 3rd sidewalk square, counting under her breath, deeply satisfied with a system only she fully understood. "Daddy," she said, not looking up from her counting, "why do you still smile after that mean lady yelled at you?" Coulter stopped walking. He crouched down, one knee on the cold concrete, lower back aching from the night shift. He looked straight into his daughter's brown eyes. She waited, patient, unblinking. The way she always waited when she sensed a real answer was coming. Because kindness isn't about what other people do to us, sweetheart. It's about who we choose to be, every single time, even when it's hard. One small act can ripple out into something much bigger than we can see, like a stone in a pond. Juniper considered this with the gravity of someone reviewing important evidence. "Okay," she said finally, "but she was still mean." "She was," Coulter agreed quietly. "She was." He stood, brushed off his knee. They walked inside together. Dr. Osai pronounced Juniper's heart murmur stable. Same word as always, same measured tone, same small exhale of relief it always produced somewhere deep in Coulter's chest. The kind of exhale that means we made it through another month. They were halfway down the main corridor, Juniper swinging Mr. Ellie in wide arcs beside her, when the emergency doors at the far end burst open. Not gradually, all at once. A gurney came through fast, surrounded by nurses moving with the particular economy of people who are afraid and cannot afford to show it. On the gurney, a little girl, 7 years old, dark blonde curls damp at her temples, eyes open and wild with the kind of terror that belongs to a child whose body is doing something entirely outside her understanding or control. Then she convulsed. Her small frame arched sharply. Her IV line tore free. She screamed once, high and sharp and awful. And then she was trying to get off the gurney, trying to run the way panicked children do when instinct has completely overtaken reason. "We need help holding the hallway," a nurse called. Coulter moved without deciding to. He guided Juniper firmly to the wall. "Stay right here, baby. Do not move." Then he was on his knees beside the girl on the floor. He had seen a seizure before. He knew what not to do as clearly as he knew what to do. He turned her carefully onto her side, folded his jacket, his good jacket, pressed that morning with Sarah's old iron. He cushioned her head with it, placed his hands on her shoulders, steady and sure, not restraining, just present. "You're safe, sweetheart," he said. Low and even. "I've got you. You're safe." She was shaking. She couldn't answer. But a voice like Coulter's, unhurried, certain, warm as a kitchen in January. It has a way of reaching people even when they are very far away. Then something happened that made 2 nurses turn their faces away to collect themselves. Juniper stepped forward from the wall, small, deliberate steps. She crossed the hallway and crouched beside the seizing girl. With both hands, careful as a child setting a table for company, she placed Mr. Ellie on the girl's chest. "This is Mr. Ellie," she said, in the matter-of-fact tone that 6-year-olds use for the most important things. "He helps me when my heart hurts. He's for you now. Don't be scared." Nobody spoke. The hallway held its breath. The seizure lasted 43 seconds. Coulter counted every one. When it ended, when the small body stilled and the blue eyes opened and focused, when the little girl came back from wherever she'd been, her hand found Coulter's wrist and held on. Surprising strength for someone so small. "Please," she whispered, "don't let me die. Mommy isn't here." "I'm here," Coulter said. "I've got you." He stayed until the medical team fully took over. Then, because it was simply what he did, he helped an exhausted nurse gather the scattered supplies and clean up the spilled saline on the hallway floor. Nobody asked him to. It didn't occur to him to wait to be asked. In the elevator going down, Juniper stood close against his side. She wasn't skipping anymore. "Daddy," she said quietly, "you saved her." He put his arm around her shoulders. "We did," he said. "Mr. Ellie helped." He learned the girl's name from a nurse who paused near the exit to thank him, Calloway. He didn't catch the last name. It didn't matter to him then. What mattered was that she was alive. And her mother had been called. And somewhere upstairs, a frightened child was holding a one-eared stuffed elephant that smelled like someone else's home and felt, somehow, like safety. That afternoon, a notice appeared on the hospital bulletin board near the main entrance. Red border, bold text. Critical shortage. O-negative blood donors needed immediately. Juniper read it slowly, sounding out each word with great care. Then she looked up. "Daddy, that's your special blood." He was exhausted in the way that goes past tired and becomes something quieter. A deep, settled fatigue that coffee no longer touches. His back ached. He still had to stop at Walgreens for Juniper's prescription before they closed, and he had 4 hours until his next shift began. But he heard Sarah's voice, thin as paper, steady as bedrock. "Be the kindness the world needs, Coulter." He walked to the donation center, signed the form, rolled up his sleeve, and as the needle went in, he thought, not of Marin Harrington, not of the lobby, not of any of it, but of a little girl upstairs holding a stuffed elephant, and the particular courage it takes to be frightened and still hold on. But this first donation was only the beginning. 3 days later, the hospital would call him back, urgently. And what happened in that small beige room would set into motion something that nobody in this story was remotely prepared for. The call came at 6:47 in the morning. Coulter was packing Juniper's lunch, peanut butter on wheat, crusts off, a handful of goldfish crackers in a small zip bag. The exact same lunch he made every day because it was the one thing she ate without a negotiation. When his phone buzzed on the counter, St. Vincent's, the blood bank, he listened. He set down the butter knife. He said yes. Juniper looked up from the table. She was eating cereal and drawing horses in the margins of her paper placemat. "Hospital again, Daddy?" "Hospital again, baby." She nodded with the quiet resignation of a child who has learned that the world makes demands of her father, and that her father always answers them. "Can I bring my colored pencils?" "You can bring your colored pencils." This was day 10. 3 days since the hallway, the night before. Coulter had worked his warehouse shift from 11 until 3 in the morning, slept until 6, and been woken at 6:40 by Juniper's voice through the wall. "Daddy, I heard a noise," which turned out to be the radiator, which was always the radiator. He had gone in, sat on the edge of her bed, watched her drift back to sleep, without Mr. Ellie, currently on extended loan to Calloway Harrington in the pediatric unit upstairs. Juniper had been sleeping with a folded dish towel in his place. She had not complained once. That single detail could undo a person, if you let it sit with you long enough. The donation center at St. Vincent's was a small beige room off the main corridor, narrow beds separated by thin curtains, a refrigeration unit that hummed steadily, the faint smell of antiseptic mixed with something almost floral, the way medical rooms sometimes smell when they're trying very hard to feel less like medical rooms. The phlebotomist's name was Darlene. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and had the calm, efficient warmth of a woman who has witnessed a great deal of human courage in this small space and has chosen to honor it quietly. She looked at Coulter's file, then at him. Her expression was professional but careful. "Mr. Whitaker, you donated 48 hours ago and you worked a night shift last night. 1 unit is the absolute maximum we can safely draw today." She paused. "Are you certain you want to proceed?" Coulter thought of the girl on the hallway floor, the way her fingers had gripped his sleeve like a lifeline, the way she had said, "Please don't let me die," with the devastating directness of a child who doesn't yet know to soften hard things. "She needs it," he said simply. "I can handle it." Darlene nodded. She'd heard those exact words in this room before, in different voices. They never stopped meaning something. He settled back on the narrow bed. The fluorescent light above buzzed softly. Juniper arranged her colored pencils on the chair beside her with great seriousness and began drawing. A horse, he suspected, possibly a horse and an elephant. The needle went in. The line ran red. Coulter watched the ceiling and let his mind travel somewhere quiet. Sarah's kitchen on Sunday mornings, the toast she burned without fail. Surprised by it every single time. The coffee she made too strong. The way Juniper had inherited her mother's laugh. Sudden, completely unguarded. The kind that fills a room before you've had time to brace for it. He was going pale. He could feel it. Not pain exactly, but a slow, soft dimming. Like a lamp when the power dips just slightly. He turned his head toward Juniper and managed a tired smile. "Daddy's okay, baby. Remember what we said? Kindness is the best medicine." Juniper studied his face with the unsettling precision of a child who pays very close attention. "You look like you need soup," she said. "Maybe later," he said. He told her a story to pass the time, an old one she loved. About the winter Sarah had given their last $20 to a woman in a parking lot, sitting on the ground next to a flat tire, crying in the cold. They'd eaten cereal for dinner that night. Sarah had called it an adventure. Juniper had heard this story before. She never got tired of it. She nodded at the end the way she always did, slowly, solemnly, as though filing it under something important. Then Darlene came back. She stood at the bedside holding the sealed collection bag, and something in her expression had shifted. It was no longer purely professional. There was wonder there, the quiet, startled kind, the kind that arrives when science confirms something it almost didn't believe possible. She kept her voice low, measured. "Mr. Whitaker, your blood contains an exceptionally rare antigen combination. We almost never see it in our donor database." She looked at him steadily. "It is a perfect biological match for the child currently in critical care upstairs. This one unit, today's donation, may determine whether she survives the next 72 hours. The room was very still. Coulter closed his eyes. Just a man who showed up, he thought. Just a father doing what fathers do. He might have stayed in that stillness a while longer. Except the donation room door opened. Hard. Fast. The way a door opens when someone has been moving quickly and stops only because the room itself stopped them. Marin Harrington stood in the doorway. She was unrecognizable from the woman who had crossed the lobby 10 days ago. Her blonde hair, always so precisely arranged, was loose and falling. Her designer suit was wrinkled in a way that told you exactly what the last 3 nights had looked like. A waiting room chair, a hospital blanket, a phone pressed to her ear in a corridor at 2 a.m. Her eyes were red-rimmed and stripped of every layer of composure she had spent years building. She had come to find the donor who had saved her daughter. She stood in the doorway, and she saw Coulter Whitaker. The navy uniform, the crooked name patch, the calloused hands, now lying quiet at his sides, a thin medical line running from his inner arm. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Coulter looked at her, without surprise, without anger, without the faintest trace of satisfaction. Just the quiet, patient look of a man who has made his peace with the world and expects nothing from it in return. The moment held. She had recognized him, but she still didn't know the whole truth. Not about the hallway, not about Mr. Ellie, not about Juniper's small voice saying, "Don't be scared." She didn't know any of it yet. What she learned in the coming week would bring her to her knees. Literally, on the floor of a hospital recovery lounge, in front of a man she had once treated as though he were invisible. Marin Harrington had built her entire career on information. She knew quarterly earnings before the numbers were finalized. She could read a boardroom the way a compass reads north. Instinctive, immediate, without effort. Information was the thing she trusted most. Because information didn't have feelings, didn't ask you to reconsider anything you'd already decided. But the image she carried out of that donation room, the calloused hands lying still, the thin red line, the quiet eyes that held no anger, that image did not behave like information. It followed her back up the elevator. It sat with her in the plastic chair outside the pediatric ICU. It was there at 2 a.m. when she woke with a start from a half-sleep and couldn't remember, for one panicked moment, where she was. She had come to thank the donor. Instead, she had stood in a doorway and gone mute, which was not something Maren Harrington did. She left because Calloway needed her. She told herself she would deal with the rest later, but some things don't wait for later. 1 week after that doorway moment, day 17, Calloway was stable, still wired to monitors, still in the pediatric wing, but the color had come back to her face, and that morning she had asked for apple juice and complained that the TV remote was broken, which the nurses had reported to Maren like good news from a very small but very important front. Maren went to her office for the first time in more than 2 weeks. It felt strange to her, too large, too still, too much like a room belonging to a person she wasn't entirely sure she was anymore. The framed Forbes cover on the shelf stared back at her, the woman who runs the room. She didn't look at it for long. She sat at her desk. She opened the employee database. She typed slowly, the way you type when you're not completely sure you want to find what you're looking for. The janitor, day shift, executive lobby. She didn't know his name. She had never learned his name. She realized that now. Sitting in that too quiet office, in 4 years of running this company, she had never once learned the name of the man who cleaned her lobby floor at 5:30 in the morning. The file opened. Coulter Whitaker, age 34, custodial staff, day shift, formerly senior mechanical engineer, 7 years of industrial systems design, separated from role following family medical crisis. She read that twice. Emergency contact, Juniper Whitaker, age 6, father's daughter. No secondary contact listed. No secondary contact. Just him and a 6-year-old. She cross-referenced with the blood bank records. She had the clearance. She had always had the clearance. And it occurred to her now, sitting in this office, that having access to people's private information and actually paying attention to them were entirely different things. The donation record appeared. Coulter Whitaker, blood type O negative. Rare antigen profile, emergency directed donation, pediatric critical care. Recipient, Calloway Ann Harrington. The room shifted. Maren put one hand flat on the desk and held it there. The man she had humiliated in front of 20 employees. The man she had looked at with open contempt, whose uniform she had dismissed, whose name she had never bothered to learn, had given his blood to keep her daughter alive, had driven himself to a hospital on 2 hours of sleep for a child he did not know, for no reason at all except that a child needed it, and he was the one who could give it. She thought of her own voice in the lobby that morning. If this is the standard we're hiring now. She pressed her hand harder against the desk. She found him in the recovery lounge on the ground floor, a modest room with soft lighting, a coffee pot that had been sitting on the burner since morning, and a row of padded chairs along the wall. Coulter was there for a routine follow-up check, sitting with Juniper beside him, her colored pencils spread across her lap. She appeared to be drawing an ambitious mural of horses across 3 connected pages of a spiral notebook, with a small one-eared elephant in the corner of each page. Maren walked in. Coulter looked up, a beat of silence, brief, dense, the length of a single held breath. The coffee pot hummed. Nothing else moved. And then Maren Harrington went to her knees, right there on the linoleum floor beside his chair, her expensive skirt pressing flat against the tile, her hands folded in her lap, the posture of a woman who has arrived at something true and is not going to try to look composed while she's there. "I'm the one who judged you in the lobby," she said. Her voice was stripped of everything that usually lived in it. "I looked at your uniform and decided I already knew everything about you. And then you saved my daughter, in that hallway, with your own hands, when no one asked you to, and you came back and gave your blood when you had nothing left, after I treated you as though you were invisible." She stopped, her jaw tightened. "I am so sorry," she said. "I am so deeply sorry." Coulter looked at her for a long moment. His face was the same as it always was. Steady, patient, without performance of any kind. "She was a frightened child," he said quietly. "Kindness doesn't ask for thanks. It doesn't keep score." Juniper looked up from her horses. "My daddy says one small act can change everything," she announced, with the confidence of someone who has field-tested this theory and found it sound. Like a stone in a pond. Marin looked at this small girl, at the spiral notebook, the colored pencils, the matter-of-fact brown eyes, and then at the paper Juniper quietly pulled from her notebook and set on Marin's knee. Two little girls, drawn in careful crayon, one with curly hair, one without, holding hands in a green meadow, a small elephant standing between them. "That's Calloway and me," Juniper said simply. "We're already friends. She just doesn't know it yet." Marin looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she looked up at Coulter, and for the first time in this entire story, she saw him, fully. Clearly, without the filter of the lobby or the suit or the quarterly projections, she wept, quietly and completely. The way ice breaks in early spring. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but because the temperature has finally shifted just enough that what was frozen cannot hold. Coulter reached over and handed her the paper cup of long cold coffee pot coffee. She took it with both hands. That small gesture, the offering of it, the receiving of it, said everything that neither of them had words for. An apology, however sincere, is only words. Marin knew that. What she did next, in the very lobby where this story began, would prove that she understood the difference between saying something and meaning it. 2 days after the recovery lounge, Patricia called. Patricia had worked for Marin for 6 years and had perfected the professional phone call. Efficient, informative, giving nothing away. But this time, underneath the polish, there was something warmer. The way a church hall sounds when the folding tables are going up and the casseroles are just starting to heat, and everyone can feel, without being told, that something worth showing up for is about to happen. She asked if Mr. Whitaker would be available to come to the executive offices, not the lobby, upstairs. Coulter wore his good jacket, pressed with Sarah's old iron, the fold marks smoothed out, the same jacket he had folded under Calloway's head on a hospital hallway floor not 2 weeks before. He had Juniper drop it off at the dry cleaner himself, which she had done with enormous gravity, as though entrusted with something important, which she was. Marin was standing when he walked in, not positioned behind the wide desk in that boardroom chair the way a CEO stands when she wants to remind you of the altitude between you, but at the window, hands loosely at her sides, watching Michigan Avenue the way you watch something when you're not really seeing it, when your eyes are on the street but your mind is somewhere that doesn't have a view. She turned when she heard him, gestured simply to the chair. "Please, sit down, Coulter." He sat. She didn't preamble. She had clearly worked on this, had probably revised it in her head until everything that sounded like performance had been stripped away and only the true parts remained. "I went through your complete file, not just the medical records, your engineering background. 7 years of industrial systems design. You left that work to care for your family." She didn't soften it with a euphemism. "You never came back to it." He was quiet. "I'd like to offer you a consulting role. Part-time, flexible, project-based work that uses what you actually know. Full health coverage for you and Juniper. Effective immediately. Hours structured around her appointments and your schedule, not ours." The word immediately landed somewhere deep in Coulter's chest, in the specific place where he stored the things he didn't say out loud. Juniper's next cardiology appointment was in 6 weeks. Her daily prescription cost $94 a month out of pocket. He had been managing. He was always managing. But managing and breathing are not the same thing. And he had forgotten, somewhere in the last 3 years, what the second one felt like. He didn't say any of that. "That's generous," he said. "It isn't," Marin replied, and her voice was flat with honesty in a way that he respected. "It's overdue, and it isn't enough, but it's where I can start." A good silence settled between them, the kind that holds something rather than hides it. "I have one condition," Coulter said. She waited. "Juniper and Calloway need regular time together." The warmth in his voice was unmistakable and unhurried. "They've already decided they're sisters. It would be a shame to argue with 6-year-olds when they happen to be right about something." Something shifted in Marin's face, the last remnant of the Forbes cover composure giving way to something she hadn't let herself be in a very long time. Something lighter, something like relief. She laughed. A real one, short and genuine and slightly surprised by itself. "Agreed," she said. The company-wide event was held on a Friday morning. The same lobby, the same marble floor that Coulter had mopped at 5:30 a.m. on the morning this all began. The same floor-to-ceiling windows, the same executive elevator, a small podium near the elevator bank, a single camera on a tripod, live streaming to every Harrington Industries office in 3 states. Because Marin had decided, clearly, without debate, that if you were going to make something right, you go back to the exact spot where you made it wrong. You don't find a neutral room. You return to the scene and you say it there. Marin stood at the podium. Coulter stood beside her. His hands were clasped loosely in front of him. His natural posture when he is settled, when he is not performing anything for anyone, when he is simply himself. She spoke without notes, directly into the camera, in front of the people who had watched in silence on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago, 17 days ago. "I judged a man by his uniform. I looked at a cleaning cart in front of the executive elevator, and I saw an inconvenience. I did not see a trained engineer. I did not see a father working 2 jobs and raising a daughter alone. I did not see a man who had, in the days before I arrived at work that morning, saved my daughter's life with his own hands, and then come back to give his blood to keep her alive." The lobby was very quiet. Quiet in the way that means everyone in it is paying attention. "I am personally and publicly apologizing to Coulter Whitaker, and I am announcing the Harrington Single Parent Support Program, full health insurance, emergency child care assistance, and flexible scheduling, available immediately to every single parent in this organization. Because no one in this building should ever have to choose between their child's health and their job." She paused. Her voice steadied itself. "This program is named after the man who taught me that kindness is the only thing we can give away and still keep." The applause that followed moved through the lobby the way warmth moves through a house in winter when someone finally opens the door. Not loud exactly, just true. Coulter stepped to the microphone. He looked out at the faces, at people who had stood in this lobby 3 weeks ago and said nothing while a man in a janitor's uniform was spoken to like he didn't matter. He didn't address that. He had never been a man who kept ledgers. "Don't wait," he said. "Don't wait for someone else to do the right thing first. Be the kindness the world needs. Right now, in whatever room you're standing in." He stepped back. Juniper, standing just behind him, tugged his sleeve with great urgency. "Daddy," she stage whispered, loudly enough for the front 3 rows to hear clearly. "You forgot the stone in the pond part." The laughter that broke across the lobby was the best kind. Sudden, warm, completely unplanned. The kind that releases something. The kind a room remembers. The program would go on to serve 412 employees in its first year, but the moment that nobody in that building saw coming, the one that would stay with every person who witnessed it long after the applause had faded, was still 6 weeks away. It would arrive on a December morning, with snow coming down sideways, and 2 little girls sharing 1 microphone. 6 weeks later, early December, Chicago. The kind of morning that smells like wood smoke and cold radiators, and the particular sweetness of a city doing its level best to be beautiful despite the weather. The lobby of Harrington Industries had been rearranged. Long tables with simple green centerpieces, a small stage near the elevator bank. The same elevator bank where a cleaning cart had once sat partially in the way on a Tuesday morning that nobody there would ever quite forget. A sound system set up by a volunteer from IT who had clearly always wanted to be a concert roadie and was doing his absolute best. This was the official public launch of the Harrington Single Parent Support Program. 412 employees across 3 states would qualify for benefits they had been quietly going without. Health coverage, emergency childcare, flexible hours, the kind of support that sounds abstract in a press release, but is, in the daily life of a single parent. The difference between filling a prescription and deciding not to this month because the electric bill is due. Marin had told Patricia she wanted the event to feel like a family gathering, not a corporate announcement. Patricia had looked at her for a long moment and written family gathering in her planner without comment. Because she was very good at her job. The morning went warmly. Stories were shared. Numbers were presented, not as achievements, but as acknowledgments of a gap that had existed for too long. Coulter sat in the front row with Juniper, who had been promised she could draw during the long parts, and was currently adding a small cat to the corner of her horse meadow. And then, near the end, the sound system crackled. The IT volunteers' one weakness. It settled, and then the opening notes of something familiar drifted through the lobby. Gentle, slightly imperfect, exactly right. Juniper Whitaker walked onto the small stage. She was wearing a yellow dress, not the raincoat, though she had made a thorough case for it. Pressed carefully with Sarah's old iron, smoothed until it was almost perfect. She carried herself with the particular confidence of a child who has been told she is loved every single day of her life. Beside her, Callaway Harrington, fully recovered. Dark blonde curls bouncing with the barely contained energy of a 7-year-old who had been instructed to walk calmly and was honoring that instruction in the loosest possible interpretation. In her arms, Mr. Ellie. One-eared, beloved, worn smooth at the seams, currently on permanent loan from Juniper's household, and now a fixture in 2. The 2 of them stepped up to the shared microphone. They did not stay on key. They were slightly too close, which made the sound bloom in a lopsided way that no audio engineer would have approved of. Callaway forgot a word in the second verse, and Juniper whispered it to her without missing a beat, still singing. Not breaking eye contact with the audience, still perfectly composed in the way that only a 6-year-old who has decided something matters can be. "You've got a friend in me." By the 3rd line, several employees had stopped pretending they weren't moved. By the chorus, the lobby had gone soft with the specific kind of emotion that arrives when something that should have been true all along is finally, simply, true. When the song ended, Callaway climbed off the stage and crossed the lobby directly to Coulter. The way a compass finds north, without hesitation, without looking for permission, she wrapped both arms around his waist and held on. "You're my hero, Mr. Coulter," she said, her voice muffled against his jacket. His hand rested on the top of her head, light, steady. He didn't say anything. Some things arrive in a place too deep for words, and you know enough to leave them there. Afterward, the 4 of them walked outside into the cold together. Snow, the soft, sideways kind that settles on your eyelashes before you think to blink. Michigan Avenue at mid-morning, unhurried. The city going about its business the way cities do, indifferent to the small, significant things happening at the level of human beings on the sidewalk. Juniper took Callaway's hand. Their mittens were different colors, yellow and red, and they swung their joined hands between them as they walked, easy and natural, as though they had always done this. Marin walked beside Coulter. She had her coat collar up against the cold, and her face, without the boardroom composure or the Forbes cover polish, looked younger somehow, more like a person, more like herself. She watched the girls ahead of them. "People are like machines," Coulter said quietly, watching the snow. "Sometimes they just need recalibration and a little kindness to get them running again." Marin turned to look at him. She smiled. Not a CEO smile, not a calculated one, just the simple, unguarded smile of one human being recognizing another. "Thank you," she said. "Thanks, Sarah," he said. "It was her idea." The snow came down soft over Michigan Avenue. Somewhere down the block, a church bell rang. The old kind. The kind that has struck the same hour from the same tower for longer than anyone walking beneath it has been alive. The four of them moved forward together, not strangers anymore, not exactly family, not in any way a form would recognize. Something quieter than that, and more enduring. The particular warmth of people who have been broken in similar places and chosen, in spite of everything, to stay open. This story teaches us something specific, not a slogan, but a practice. Coulter didn't wait until he felt strong. He acted while he was exhausted, underpaid, and grieving. That's the part we don't talk about enough. So here's what this story is really asking of you. This week, think of one person in your life who does invisible work. The neighbor who shovels your walk without being asked. The aide at your doctor's office who remembers your name. The grandchild who calls every Sunday, even when you forget to call back. Write their name on a note card. Tuck a $5 bill inside. Or don't. Just mail it with 3 sentences that say, "I see you. What you do matters. Thank you." That's it. 3 sentences, a stamp, a name. You don't have to save a life to change one. Sometimes the stone is that small. And the pond, as Juniper would tell you, is a great deal bigger than it looks. This story was written by a human supported by AI. It doesn't aim to change the whole world, just one small corner of your heart. To help you believe that amid all the hardship, there is still room for kindness, for unconditional goodness, and for the most beautiful things quietly existing, waiting for us to notice them.